right, we're back and we're going to continue to work on the chain analysis because this is a bigger skill and I want us just to take our time with it. And I want to ask you, have you practiced it yet? Try to practice it. Try to go through the steps. I would say at least do this skill 3 times, okay? The idea is we really want to understand what the breakdown in our conflicts are, how it actually happens, what we could do differently, when we could do things differently, and how our thinking, our interpreting of a situation influences it. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail today and starting with the problem behavior. What you want to be focusing on is what you did, said, thought, or felt that is not aligning with what your goal is or what your values are. You want to focus on the intensity of your behavior, especially because as you improve, you might not altogether change your behavior, but you might lower the intensity. Maybe you yelled less loud, maybe your patience, instead of lasting 5 minutes, lasted 7 minutes, where you're able to track, okay, we are progressing, even though I would rather have patience that lasts 30 minutes. I want you to also look at, is it something that you didn't do? Is it that you wanted to start expressing gratitude more to somebody and you didn't do that? And so you're looking at that moment when I should have expressed gratitude, or I should have acknowledged what they said. I should have reflected it back to them. I should have taken a moment just to say, hey, I'm sorry for what I did. Looking for those moments. And this doesn't have to only be about interaction. This could be about the moment that we start to take the drink that we promised we would not take. Looking for those things that we could have done versus what we actually did do. So it's a self-reflection on our part. What could we do differently? A very important thing is describing the prompting event, the buildup, both in the environment and in us, looking at when did this all start? Because a lot of times we find out that conflict or an issue starts long before it blew up. Maybe it's a message that we got from our spouse that we didn't receive well, and we should have addressed in that moment. And because we didn't, later when dinner doesn't come out good, we freak out, where it might not be limited to that moment. It could be a day's worth of frustration, and especially things like using substances or overeating, which is goals for many people, that could have to do with, I took on too much earlier in the day and now I'm left frustrated. And looking at the vulnerability factors is important. Coming to understand yourself, coming to understand, do I have a rejection wound? And so when I don't feel heard, that triggers me and I start to lose focus. I start to get more impatient or more frustrated. Looking at, what does this person mean to me? How do I feel about them? Does that contribute to the interaction? Then we really want to look at the chain events. We want to look at the chain events to understand, when could we do something differently? What broke down to get me to that point? So thinking about, okay, you said this, and then I interpreted it this way and responded this way. And then you said this, and we look at that in detail to really analyze, okay, at what point could I have interpreted things differently? And you could find moments in many of the chains. And that's why it's good to write it out and really analyze it, and maybe even compare notes with somebody else, a sibling, a spouse, or whatever. And then looking at the consequences of it, because it might not be immediate consequences. The consequences could come later. Why is my wife not talking to me 2 days later? Well, maybe it's starting to settle in. And then really analyze any kind of skillful behavior that we could have inserted that could have helped us change the direction of the conversation, the direction of the weakness. Again, if it is something about addiction or bad habits that we're acting out on, when did I notice that I was so stressed that I need to use a coping skill, that I need to take a break? And when we realize that we limit ourselves sometimes from using our skills, it's like, guys, we need to start getting more desperate and figure out, how can I integrate them so I reach my goals?